Okay, welcome to the week two go-to session. This is the second of four go-to sessions we're going to be hosting this month. This month we're going to focus on writing the essay because that's what you have to be working on right now. I just announced to the class that I'm getting over being sick, and not only that, but I'll be flying out of town starting this Thursday for an entire week. So I'm going to try my best to stay on top of things. But let's move forward, okay? So I have the assignment sheet open here for writing the essay. Please make sure that you go over this with some care, okay? Because I'm not going to read everything out loud because that would be incredibly boring for the session. But there's an explanation about what an essay is. Most of you probably know, but still, it might be useful to read over some of this information. I really want to go over though some of these instructions here. Okay, so on the left here you have the core instructions, right? Writing an essay that explores your chosen role model, and you basically have two choices. Okay, you're going to choose a role model and either discuss three different ways they've persevered, okay, and how they've dealt with this, or you're just going to choose like one major way in which they've persevered, and then three ways in which they handled that or solved it. Okay, does that make sense? Okay, so we're either going to focus on one major issue and then three ways that they dealt with it, or three separate issues and then the three ways that they dealt with it. This is basically so that people who get stuck with, oh, I can't find very much information about concrete obstacles or setbacks or adversity that my role models faced, that they still can complete the assignment because chances are you can find one. And if it's a big enough obstacle, maybe there are different ways that they've dealt with it. Okay, so if you're writing about, I don't know, Kanye West and you focus on something pretty big like his auto accident or the negativity he received from the press for, remember back when he disturbed Taylor Swift during the VMAs, right? Maybe there are three ways, distinct ways Kanye West dealt with those things. So that would be an example of like one obstacle and then three ways he dealt with it. Although, to be honest, with Kanye West, he's so easy that it would probably be easier just to focus on three separate concrete issues because he's had so many. Okay, so you'll have to decide for yourself. I'd say most students choose the three problem method. They find three distinct concrete examples of perseverance and just go through them one at a time. That's probably the easiest way. But again, if you can't fulfill that, there is the option of just choosing one. Um, and be sure that you touch on these issues too. Sometimes students forget about this. You have to discuss what you learned from your role model's perseverance, okay, and apply it. Okay, what you learned from your role model about problems you may encounter and their possible solution. How will you use perseverance, these problem-solving methods, and when you apply it to your own industry path or your own work in your degree program. So yeah, that's an important part. So once you get done discussing how your role model has persevered, you got to turn the focus to you. Okay, what you learned from your role model's perseverance and how you can apply it. So don't forget to cover that. The other thing I want to point out is you get this stuff here about choosing an audience, and I just want to quickly explain what this means because this sometimes trips students up because it's a bit confusing because it says you could write your essay to future employers or industry connections or even your own family. This is more designed to inspire you to like help you find your flow when it comes to writing the essay. Sometimes it's better when you're writing to imagine almost that your potential readers are looking over your shoulder. Believe it or not, I do that. Sometimes when I'm writing something, I can imagine, like, oh gosh, I can imagine my mom reading this, or I can imagine my best friend, or I can imagine my boss reading this and being really, really impressed. Okay, that's kind of what this is about here. Don't get confused because we've had students who've taken the class in the past and are taking it for the second or third time think that they literally need to write like a letter to future employees or industry connections or their own family. And that's not what we're talking about here. It's just about like if your paper had to be read by someone, okay, someone who wanted to learn about not just your role model's perseverance, about whoever you've chosen, but to read about it in a way to learn more about you, okay, that you're passionate about something, that you have the dedication to persevere, that you're not going to give up. If someone were to read that paper and learn about you, if you were to include it, for example, in let's say a portfolio of your work, and someone were to read it and think, "Oh my gosh, wow, look at this! Look what Jared wrote, or look at what Dana wrote, or look what Eric wrote. This is telling me a lot about who they are, and what their values are, and how they're going to persevere, and how look this role model that they've decided to write about embodies that." Okay, like who would that be for you? Do you think it would be potential employers one day, fellow people who are in your industry, or possibly people in your own family? And once you kind of decide upon that, use that as inspiration. Okay, you're not literally writing to these people. Okay, and there's a question on the quiz, the check-in for this week that deals with this, like which audience are you writing to? That's all you have to answer. It's like which one of these three and explain why. But yeah, if you read through this on your own, it will make a little bit more sense. Okay, so let me get back to my PowerPoint, and because I don't want to risk interrupting the recording again by putting it in slideshow mode, I'm just going to keep it small if that's okay. Okay, so how do we go about writing the essay? By that I mean, how do we put it together organization wise? Well, I'm going to show just a really basic organization method. Probably a lot of you already know this, but for those of you who are sort of new to essay writing, you might want to either take a screenshot of this or just rewatch the video and take notes, because this is pretty classic stuff here. Okay, so let's say, yeah, you're focusing on your role model who does have, let's say, three concrete examples of perseverance. You'll need an introduction of some sort. Okay. By the way, each of these bullet points here in orange represents a separate paragraph. So we're talking about, probably at minimum like a six-paragraph essay. You'll need an introduction paragraph, something that ideally grabs your reader's attention. And probably, hopefully, you've learned about this before in high school. Sometimes you get this information, right? There are lots of ways to grab your reader's attention, beginning with a personal story, beginning with a quotation, beginning with a surprising fact, beginning with a thoughtful question, right? And all these methods can be incredible. They become less incredible if you just use them generically or mechanically. So a thoughtful question can be a really powerful way if you use the question asking as a way to transition into your larger topic. It can be a really bad move, however, if you're just generically asking questions that your readers aren't interested in. So if you're just asking questions like, what is love? What is life? That's not really a powerful question. But think about the different ways that you can grab readers' attentions. I'd say the personal anecdote or personal story is a common one. But or at the very least, even if you don't grab the reader's attention, we need some definition of the issue, which for this means probably discussing your role model and the theme of perseverance and delivering a thesis. And as I note here, a thesis is a single sentence or two that typically appears at the end of the introduction. For this assignment, the thesis is probably going to be pretty easy. It's just you're just telling your readers that your role model, whoever it is, serves as an example, excellent example of perseverance, and that she or he has a lot that one can learn from. Okay, you'd find your own kind of natural way to say that, but essentially most of your papers are going to explore that issue. Let me take a sip from my drink. And then when we get into the body of the paper, we just make sure that we have separate paragraphs that focus on our separate examples of perseverance. So we discuss perseverance example number one. So if it's Kanye West, maybe it's about the auto accident, okay, which we discuss in detail, and then how our role model dealt with that. So in Kanye West's case, maybe it's he dealt with it by writing a song about it and recording a song, right? Remember that famous song, Through the Wire? Okay, then we move on to perseverance example number two, which could be something else. His backlash for interrupting Taylor Swift at the VMAs, or I know he lost his mother kind of in a sad way. She went in for basic surgery and didn't survive, so that was another issue. And we could probably come up with more issues. Okay, but whatever they are, we go through them one at a time, making sure that we discuss them in detail, and then discuss how our role model dealt with it. And this is a chance for us to use details, support, evidence from our research. Okay, this is our chance to incorporate, yeah, the details that come from our research, maybe even a quotation if there's a powerful one, because we're trying to get the story down on the page as carefully as possible. And then, yeah, we need to make sure that we have at least one paragraph where we explain what we learned about perseverance from our role model and how we can apply that to ourselves. And then we need some sort of conclusion where we find a natural way to echo or summarize the main points and find a way to bring the essay to a satisfying close. Okay, so there's a really, really basic structure. And if you're only dealing with a role model who has one concrete example of perseverance, it's kind of a similar thing. Okay, we need an introduction where we find a natural way to present our role model and the theme of perseverance. Then we deliver our single concrete obstacle or setback or problem that our role model had to deal with, and we tell that in detail. And then we just devote separate paragraphs to the different ways that our role model overcame that. Okay, so explain one way your role model overcame or dealt with this obstacle. Explain another way that your role model overcame or dealt with this obstacle. And again, finally, making sure to leave space to discuss what you learned from your role model's perseverance and how it can apply to you in your future path. And then we have some sort of conclusion where we bring the essay to a natural close. Okay, so this is pretty basic stuff, right? Any questions so far? Does this make sense? I mean, I hate it when I kind of go through this stuff quickly because it I worry that people who aren't used to essay writing might stumble or get confused. But this is pretty basic stuff. Okay, we just have different paragraphs for the different parts of our essay. Okay, so let's talk first a little bit about research. You had to do research for week one. Let me just repeat what research is and what research is not. Um, Research is not just running to find something to throw in your paper because, oh gosh, look at the assignment sheet. It says that I need research. No, research is supposedly, in theory, supposed to make you sort of a mini expert, okay? The idea is that if you spend as much time as possible, I don't know how many people watched the Q&A session that I recorded and put up for everybody, but in that session, I kind of talked about this, that the goal here is not just to run and find just any three sources. You're trying to find the three best sources. So maybe you had to read through five, six, seven articles. And doing so has its benefits because doing all that hard work makes you a sort of mini expert. So when it's time to sit down and write about your role model, like you sort of know your role model so well that the task of being able to write about how they persevered shouldn't be that difficult because you spend so much time researching them. Okay, that's what research is all about. And in that sense, research is more like joining a discussion. People have been writing about your role model, especially if they're big enough. Okay, you're not the first person to ever write words about them. So what you're really doing is you're sort of joining that conversation. Okay, joining that discussion. Another way to think about it is, imagine that there's a dinner party going on. Okay, a dinner party, not like a keg party or something wild or crazy. A somewhat formal adult affair where people are standing around in groups talking. Probably you're not going to just jump right into the conversation and start talking away. You're probably going to hang out at the edges, eavesdrop a little bit, figure out things by listening, and then when you feel comfortable, you'll jump in and contribute. The research is kind of like that in that the eavesdropping takes the form of you doing that research, reading those articles, reading those five, six, seven articles in order to find the best three. And then, yes, after you've done enough research, then you finally feel comfortable to join the conversation. Okay. Yeah, I talked about this in the Q&A session. It's under the week one lecture activity, so that's where you found the longer video. That was like an hour and a half, but there was also a Q&A video that I specifically made for our class, so people could hear my voice, they could hear my thoughts on things. For instance, I specifically told people who are having trouble researching that yeah, sometimes it's difficult to find articles if you literally type in keywords like setbacks or adversity or perseverance or problems or failures. I mean, sometimes you'll get great stuff, but sometimes you won't. And one piece of advice I gave was just, hey, just find good articles, okay? If you can find in-depth, thoughtful articles, probably they're going to touch on perseverance almost by accident, okay? Because if you think of a long piece that's published in somewhere like Rolling Stone or the New Yorker, um, or some other article publication that features really 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 long in-depth articles on people as a sort of cover story. Yeah, I mean, chances are they'll probably touch on issues of perseverance even without trying. And if the article itself doesn't go that much into depth about it, well, at least you know what to start looking for. At least you know, oh, hey, this article mentioned in passing that the person went through bankruptcy in 2010. Maybe I could do research into that. Okay, so sometimes just finding good articles is what you should be trying to do. Jared says, especially when we are researching people that make a habit of always looking good for their fans. Okay, yeah. So I know some people strike out because they feel like, oh, I keep looking and I don't find anything that directly says perseverance or it doesn't say anything in the title about setbacks or adversity. Then just find good articles and read them. And if that sounds like a lot of work, I would say that A, if you're writing about someone you care about, it shouldn't feel like that much work. Okay, it should feel kind of like fun. I know that sounds odd, but if it's someone you care about, it shouldn't feel like that tough of work. Um, And yeah, the more you read, the more you'll discover issues of perseverance, whether you're trying to or not. Okay, so Jared also mentioned that he's concerned about APA formatting. How many people here have used APA in the past? How many people are comfortable with it? How many people are scared to death of it? Jared says me. I don't know which question he's answering. Maybe the are you afraid of it? Yeah, scared. Okay. By the way, others can type in the chat. I'll just like I'm doing with Eric Jared's comments. I'm reading his comments out loud, and people who watch the video after the fact will see the chat comments. So even though it's frustrating, you can't see one another's comments. That's fine. We'll deal with it. Okay, so APA style. Okay, so we're talking about style, not this woman's style. She has a lot of style with her kerchief and her flamboyant colors. No, we're not talking about style like that. We're talking about APA style. You've probably heard of APA, MLA. Okay, the style system we use here at Full Sail is APA. English is typically the first place you learn it in depth, but you're going to need to use it for future classes, so it's important to get it down. APA really covers like three major areas. So, issues of layout and format. So, this means rules governing things like paragraphing, font size and style, the insertion of page numbers, the creation of a header, etc. Okay, so we're talking about the overall look of the document. APA has very specific rules about that. And then two things that you're probably more used to associating with APA or MLA, the need for in-text citations, and at the very end of the paper, a list of references, okay, where you will put your sources in full. So the good news is with layout and formats, I'm going to help you a little bit if I switch gears real quickly. Okay, this is kind of my view of things, but this is the assignment number two, the actual essay assignment. Um, I've put in a YouTube video that I created specifically for this class. I'm gonna go ahead and click on it. Of course, it's not gonna open. Let me see if I can copy and paste it real quick. Then I'll test it out later to make sure that it works. Excuse me. Okay, so here's a video. You can see it's about 26 minutes long. Um, Maybe you can even hear my voice bleeding through a little bit. But basically, this video walks you through the steps of layout. Um, excuse me. I take you through the steps one at a time. I'm trying to have parts of the video start running. There, okay. So I'm kind of showing how to create the header, how to put the title, etc. My machine's running really slowly, but okay. Um, and toward the end, I show you how to create references in real time. Okay, so I show you how to grab information from the Full Sail library and use it in your reference, and I show you how to do it just on your own as well. Okay, so here's an article from the New Yorker on Taylor Swift, and I show how to create a reference for it. Okay, so yeah, my number one piece of advice. There I am. See, I'm creating author's last name, first initial, year in parentheses. I'm going back and forth to get information from the article. Okay, so if you watch this video, which I strongly recommend doing, um, here it is. Like you'll have almost zero problems with issues of layouts and the references page. So I get a little. Sometimes I get frustrated because I shout it out. I send it out in announcements. It's here in the assignment description, but students don't always use it. But yeah, please use this YouTube this walkthrough video that I created for you. Okay, if you follow the steps in it, at least in terms of layout and the references page, you won't have any serious problems. Because you do have some other documents that have been made for you by the English department, and be aware of them too. I'm not saying ignore them. You have an APA Basics booklet, PDF. You have a visual guide to APA, which shows you what your paper should look like in finished form. But I do know that some students like the idea of someone actually walking them through the steps in real time. That sometimes it can be hard to learn APA if you just have to read about it and then follow the steps. So yeah, I've created a short video for you. I also have this little thing called the in-text citations concise guide. That's also something I made. This is purely textual. I'm gonna go ahead and open that up. I need to find a way to, in a video form, to make in-text citations interesting, but it's just so difficult. In-text citations are, they're not terribly difficult, but it's probably the thing that trips up students more than anything. Like if they watch my walkthrough video, they get layout. They can even handle the references page, but for some reason, in-text citation throws them for a loop. So I created this concise guide, which tries to boil things down to the pure minimum. But you can tell, as you see here, it does have quite a bit of text, so you will have to read it through a couple times, and really be careful with what you read so that you understand what's going on. Because in-text citations, which I'm going to go over briefly in this session, is kind of challenging because it feels almost like if you're old enough to remember those choose your own adventure books, right? You read a page or two in the book and then you have to make a choice. Do this and go to page 22, or do this and go to page 40. I don't know. Do they still have those books? Choose Your Own Adventure. Okay, so if we look at this here, I'm going to try to discuss in-text citations. Basically, any quotation, fact, or information that comes from research needs to be cited. It needs to be cited right there and then in the paper. Okay, this applies to information that you quote directly, but it doesn't have to. It applies to any information that you put in your own words. That if it comes from research. Okay, so let's imagine we have an article called "The Road Leading to Tomorrow" by John Smith. It was published in 2012. This is part of what makes in-text citations confusing. You always have two choices. First, you have to decide if you're quoting something directly or if you're not quoting something directly. Because if you're quoting something directly, you have to include always a page number or a paragraph number, but you don't if you're just paraphrasing. Okay, there's no need for a page or paragraph number. So that throws students that with if we're quoting directly, one set of rules applies. But if we're not quoting directly, we're putting things in our own words. But what we're putting in our own words comes from research. We don't need a page or paragraph number. Second, we always have two ways of doing it. Okay, so if we're quoting directly, okay, so we're taking a direct quote from the article. We have to make sure that we always include an author's last name or full name. You can put the full name if you want. Year of publication and a page or paragraph number for where that quotation comes from. Okay, so wherever that quotation comes from the article, we find whatever page number it is. Or the reason I say page or paragraph number is because sometimes you'll have an online article, okay, that doesn't have page numbers. Online articles typically don't. You just keep scrolling down. So in that case, you just find whatever paragraph it's in. But we have two options, and they're both correct. So we can pick and choose. We can choose to mention the author's name and the year of publication in our actual sentence. So we just find a way to say, according to Smith, 2012, or according to John Smith, 2012. Okay, so but as soon as we mention his name in the sentence, we put the year in parentheses. And then if we want to explain who he is, that's nice. You don't have to, but we could say, according to Smith, 2012, professor of education at Stanford University. Then comes our quote. American students are underperforming in comparison to their world peers. And then, as soon as the quotation ends, we put the page number or paragraph number from which the quotation appears. And note that the end punctuation goes after the final citation, doesn't go at the end of the quotation, because technically the end of the sentence doesn't occur until the citation is finished. Jared says, is one option preferred to the other? Is there any risk in using both options? That's a great question. I would say, I know it's frustrating, but almost the situation will tell you. You'll know when it's important to mention the author's name directly in your sentence. You'll kind of know if it makes sense to do so. Do you want to bring attention to the author's name in your actual sentence or not? So things like that. You'll kind of just know naturally which form to use. But the other option is you don't have to, you can save everything for the end. So just find a way to write your sentence. Our public schools are in trouble. According to one study, quote, so we're dealing with a direct quote, American students are underperforming in comparison to their world peers. Okay, and then at the end, we put everything in parentheses. Last name, Smith, year of publication, 2012, page or paragraph number, okay? All separated by commas. So that makes it a little bit frustrating. You have these two options that you can either split up the information by mentioning the author's last name and year in your actual sentence and saving a final citation for the end, or you can just save everything for the end. Okay, don't get confused. Let's see. Spencer has joined us. He says, "I can't see the chat." Yeah, Spencer, there's a problem with the chat this month, and I cannot figure out how to fix it for the life of me. I can see your comments, but nobody else can. Okay, so feel free to go ahead and type your comments. I'll read them out loud. People who watch the video after the fact will see your comments. But yeah, the people in the session, strange. I cannot figure it out either. I think I'm just gonna have to uninstall the program and reinstall it, but I'm afraid to do that, so I never do it. Okay, and we have the exact same options if we paraphrase, okay, which means we're putting things in our own words. So instead of this direct quote, American students are underperforming in comparison to world peers, we're just finding our own way to say that that has no similarity to the original. Because if it has too much similarity, then we're technically plagiarizing. So we find a completely new way to say it in our own words. I should say Americans, American students, I think. American students struggle not just with among their national peers, they also struggle in comparison to students worldwide, okay? So we're finding a new way to say the same information. Same rule. We can mention the author's name and immediately put the year of publication in parentheses in our actual sentence. And note, because we're not quoting directly, we don't need a page or paragraph number at the end, okay? Because there's nothing to identify. Or we can just save everything for the end. Our public schools are in trouble. According to one study, American students struggle not just among their blah, blah, blah. Okay, and at the end, we put Smith, author's name, year of publication. Okay, so I don't know. The concise guide to in-text citations that I've created and is one of your assets for this activity goes over all this and explains things in much more detail. So I would try to spend as much time with that as possible. Read that concise guide several times. Really get familiar with the information. Um, Go through, the McGraw-Hill readings. Cover this material as well. As I pointed out, you have even more documents that have been created for you by the English department. So use all of them. Start with my two if you want, the walkthrough video and the concise guide to in-text citations. But if you need more information, certainly turn to the others. Because APA is easy. I know it doesn't seem easy. To you guys, it seems incredibly nitpicky, and it seems like a bunch of rules that you don't know why you're following them. It seems completely invented. You don't know. But I'm telling you, if you just spend the time kind of learning the logic behind it, it's so easy. It really is. It's ridiculously easy. Like I can do it in my sleep. And I came to Full Sail not understanding APA at all. I was much more of an MLA person, okay? So if I can learn it, anybody can. But yeah, one of the confusions here is that you always have two options for how you handle things, and that there is a difference between whether you're quoting something directly or just paraphrasing. Jared says, once again, is there a preferred method between quoting directly or paraphrasing? Oh, okay. I thought you were talking about is there a preferred method about using the author's name directly in your sentence or saving everything for the end. Quoting directly or paraphrasing, I no, I don't know. I don't know if there's a preferred method. I mean, there is something powerful about using someone's direct words. It offers really, really strong evidence. But because you don't want to always just overwhelm your readers with just quote after quote after quote, paraphrasing can be a nice way to relieve your readers of that. So I would say quotations, at least occasional ones, are necessary. But paraphrasing allows you to kind of avoid just doing that constantly. Okay. Which leads me to a couple of kind of final pieces of advice I want to give. First of all, do not photobomb your research. So you have quotations, facts, statistics you want to share. Okay, just dropping them into your paper doesn't work. Quotations and research always need to be set up. I recommend using the sandwich technique, which means we're setting up the quotation, okay, which is like one piece of bread. Then we deliver the quotation, which is like the meat, or if you're a vegetarian, that's like the cheese or the veggies. Then we follow up the quotation with commentary, which is like the other piece of bread. Now, if I go back to the in-text citation page, when I say that we need to set up our quotations, yes, I mean, we're setting them up here, right? According to Smith, professor of education, Stanford University, quote, American students, blah, blah, blah. Yes, we're setting it up, but I'm saying that within the larger paragraph, this information would have to fit, okay? Like the sentences that come before this naturally should have been leading up to this moment so that we could say, according to Smith, and then deliver our quotation. And then when we're done with the quotation, we should be following this with some sort of commentary. We're not just dropping this information in out of the blue. Okay. So yeah, I like to call it photobombing because what is photobombing? Photobombing is when someone intentionally or unintentionally disrupts a photo, right? They get right in the way of things, just smack dab in the middle. That's what it sort of feels like if I'm reading a paper and I'm doing fine, I'm thinking, good, 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 this is a good paper. And then, boom, a quotation appears out of nowhere, or a fact or statistic. We always need to be setting things up. Second, avoid long quotations that speak entirely for you. Okay? Occasional use of research should help support your points, not the other way around. Plus, quotations over 40 words need to be placed in a special format called block format. It's not very difficult at all, but it's a new format, so why learn it if you don't have to learn it? Um, the message here is probably most of you shouldn't be using quotations that are this long. But yeah, be careful. Some students find such great research and they think, wow, this person who wrote this is just wording things a lot better than I ever could. So they just grab the whole chunk and stick it in there. I mean, they might set it up correctly. They might even cite it or have the in-text citation correct. But still, it's just way too much information. Because if I pull out those quotations, and there's precious little of your own writing left over, that's a problem, right? I need to be hearing most of your writing backed up by occasional research, not the other way around. Okay, the references page. Why do I have a big sorry sign shining up here? Because I don't have time in this session or in the day or in the week to possibly cover everything that could be on the references page. Again, I'm going to point to that APA walkthrough video that I just showed. The YouTube link is contained in the assignment description for the essay assignment. If you watch that, you'll see me create references in real time. Okay, and if you can do that and if you can follow that, you should be fine. The references page, again, for students who use my walkthrough or they use the other documents that are included, they don't really have too many problems. Again, it's in-text citations that seem to throw students for a loop, if anything. So the references page isn't really that scary. Okay, questions. I've purposely tried to go a little bit fast. There are some actually finer points that I would usually cover, but if people are showing up late, I mentioned that I'm getting over being deathly ill, and I mean deathly ill. It's been a really rough past 2 or 3 days, and I am flying out of town starting on Thursday for an entire week, so I need to get healthy like fast. So I'll be crawling back into bed in 5 minutes. And I said this at the beginning of the session, but I lost the recording because the recording got interrupted. So I'm just going to repeat it now at the end of the session before I take questions. Yeah, please be patient, okay? I'm going to try to get caught up. I still have your week one quizzes to grade. To be honest, I might have to put those aside briefly as I go on to grade your research assignment because that's more important. Just figure that if you did the week one check in, you'll get a fine grade on it, okay? And then I'll have to play some catch up. But yeah, we'll have to be patient this month as I come back from the brink. Okay. So questions, comments about the essay assignment that's coming up, about the research that you've done so far, about your role model, about APA format, about anything. If you have questions, now is the time to answer it. Excuse me, ask it. If you are comfortable with what we've gone over tonight, you are allowed to go and enjoy the rest of your evening. And I thank you so much for attending, and I'll see you next week at the same time. As a matter of fact, I'll be doing that session on the road because I'll be out of town, but I will be hosting next week's session. Such a great employee. Jared says, what are the things that you focus on more when grading? Any specific pet peeves that we should make an extra effort to avoid?" Oh, okay. Yeah, that's a good question. My biggest thing is probably making sure that you hit all the marks. So if that you make sure that discussion of your role model's perseverance is on the page. Okay, so if you have 3 examples to give, that you give 3 examples. Or if you give one example, but you discuss 3 different ways that your role model dealt with that one example, then fine. But that you also discuss what you learned from your role model's perseverance and how you can apply it to you. So that's one big pet peeve is just hitting the assignment requirements because there's an automatic loss, for example, if you don't discuss what you learned from your role model's perseverance and how you can apply it to you. Okay, not having that in your paper means that there's going to be at least, I don't know, 5 points taken off. And then, yeah, things like APA, because again, especially in terms of layout and format, I mean, I get a little bit sympathetic if people are still learning the in-text citations and it's not quite coming as second nature to them. But when it comes to like layouts, yeah, my walkthrough video takes you through every single step. So when I see a completely invented format, like something that looks absolutely nothing like APA, the student has just opened up a document, and it's single spaced, it's not indented, it's not proper space between right, it's just completely invented. That can lead to a huge loss of points. So I would say, yeah, just following the core. It's difficult for me to give a bad grade if a paper is basically hitting all its marks. I mean, yeah, I could lose a few points here and there if there are grammar issues, or if maybe content isn't as rich as it could be. But it's difficult for me to really give the paper a grade lower than a B if it's doing everything that it needs to do. So that would be my biggest piece of advice. Okay, good question. Any other questions? Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and stop the recording.